So good morning and welcome to day 4. We're at day 4 of New Year Nourished You. And today we are moving into blissful relaxation, which is all about nervous system regulation and also self-care. I like to put those kind of all under the same category. So before we get into that, I want to say a couple of things about moving our body. And yesterday was all about that daily movement. And I just want to encourage you to start to look at, like, yes, we were talking about moving and working in and working out and choosing what's best for us on the day. And I also want to encourage you to bring in the lens that we had on day 1 around our relationship to food, but this time looking at our relationship to exercise. So, what's our relationship like with exercise? And on those days where we don't exercise or we don't move for those 30 minutes a day, that is a guideline, not a rule. How do we feel? How do we feel about ourselves? Do we start beating ourselves up again? Or are we like, you know what? Today just wasn't it. Tomorrow we do it again. So just noticing these things. And this goes through in all areas of our life, because everything, we have a relationship with everything, right? With food, with exercise, with ourselves, with our bodies, with other people, of course. That's what we think of when we think of relationships, but there's also other things, like even relationships with money, relationships with work and our career, all of these kind of things. And there's a saying I really love that's how we do one thing is how we do everything. So often, if we start to uncover that our relationship with food, where we might be beating ourselves up about things if we're not eating the way we feel like we should, quote unquote, eat. And then we start to see a bit of a theme in all other areas as well. And we're like, oh, I do that with exercise too. Oh, I didn't do something to relax myself today. And Shana said I need to support my nervous system regulation. And now I'm beating myself up over that. I see a pattern here. So just starting to actually like zoom out and look at how you feel when you do or don't do these things when it comes to healthy habits, because that has a big impact on our health as well, not just whether or not we're doing them. And remember, things are all guidelines. And when we can start to see them as guidelines and not hard and fast rules, it takes pressure off. And that also by default makes it feel less overwhelming and makes it feel more enjoyable, right? Like if I have a rule where it's like, I've got to move my body this much every single day, that feels more like a chore. And depending how you feel about like obligation and things like that, that could either really help motivate you or it could go the opposite way. I know sometimes when I feel obliged to do things, I want to do it less, even if it's something I would have wanted to do if I had the freedom of choice beforehand. So just starting to look at how we treat different things like this and starting to look about how we feel if we don't do the things that we feel like we should quote unquote do. And speaking of shoulding, when it comes to this word, it's a very hard one to remove from our vocabulary. It's one I actually encourage us to check ourselves on whenever we say the word should, or whenever I even say the word should when I'm teaching, just acknowledging that it's like we don't have to do anything. There's no should in life. Like I like to say, stop shoulding on yourself and instead change it to could or would. So I could move my body for 30 minutes. I could do something to relax my nervous system rather than should, because again, that's changing the way we look at that thing and it's taking some of that pressure off. It's taking some of that like obligation off, and therefore we're more likely to actually want to do it. And yes, all of these things are going to be beneficial. So I could do that and it would be beneficial. So we get to choose to show up for ourselves and do that thing. This isn't about like making excuses for ourselves or being like, oh yeah, you know, like if I remove all the shoulds, then I don't have to do anything. So I can just like sit here and be a blob and not do anything. Like that's not fun. That's not fulfilling. That's not why we're here in this life. We want to enjoy ourselves, and sometimes enjoying ourselves might be the thing moving our body. Sometimes it might be, you know what, today is a day that I actually just really need to rest. And listening to yourself and learning to discern what's right for you in the moment. And again, coming back to that big theme I always teach and preach of that self-trust and knowing what is good for you. So that's something I want to say around the exercise rules, just like we spoke about the food rules, and taking some of that pressure off. And yes, it's amazing when we can move our body, and humans are designed to move. We're going to feel better. And when we start realizing that, and when we start focusing on feeling good and doing things to support us, that also can help us when it comes to any excuses might come up. It's like, oh, Shana said that I don't have to do anything because I'm removing shoulds, and I'm starting to like remove pressure for myself to support nervous system regulation. This actually feeds in today's. So therefore don't have to do anything. But sometimes the good, like the kind thing to do for ourselves and the thing to do from that place of self-love is the thing we don't want to do. So maybe rather than taking that as an excuse and be like, oh, I don't need to exercise because I've taken that should away, but I want to because I know I'm going to feel better. And I'm going to do this as a form of self-respect, as a gift to myself. And again, coming at it from that place, right? It's the difference between being kind and being nice. The same goes to other people and to ourselves. Sometimes the nice thing to do is more of like that would be making the excuse. It's like, oh, you know what? I'm feeling really fatigued today and just go easy on yourself. Be kind. Like you don't have to do that. Other times, the kind thing to do, right, there would be, yeah, I'm feeling fatigued today. And how good would I feel after a walk? And I know I just cannot be bothered doing that, but I'm going to get my booty up and I'm going to go for a walk because I know afterwards I'm going to thank myself. So can you see the difference of like the kind thing is actually the thing that's more difficult and the thing that's a little bit of tough love, but still coming from that place of love. Whereas the nice thing is kind of just buying into the excuses of like, oh no, it's okay. Like you don't have to do that. And again, this is a big game of discernment and knowing what's right for you day to day. And this is where that self-trust and starting to learn to trust yourself and know yourself and what you need is really going to be a key piece. And I have full faith in you that you can all get there. And I know back in the day, I would be very much like, oh, someone else told me I need to do this thing, so I've got to do that thing. And I wasn't necessarily trusting myself. And this is also where, if you've ever heard of like cycle syncing and like moving in a way that aligns with your cycle and eating in a way that aligns with your cycle, this is where you can start to build some self-trust as well in terms of being like, okay, well, I'm in this phase of my cycle right now. I can actually like change the way I move my body because right now I have a lot more energy and my hormones are really conducive to high intensity workouts and I feel good when I do that. And in different parts of our cycle, we don't want to be doing that because it's like actually going to be stressing our body out more because we are in that more internal period. So, and literally period. I meant that as phase, but it could literally be our period. So good morning, Sahej, as well. I saw you just joined. So just starting to think about all of this. And I think there was one other thing I wanted to say. That's everything for the movement side of thing and looking at our relationship with exercise. And Sahej, I highly recommend you go and watch the replay to get the start of that because I feel like that's going to be beneficial. And I'll send you a comment to one of your questions in the group as well around how to learn to really love it. What I just kind of went over will really support with that as well. Really taking that pressure off will, yeah, it makes a massive difference. So the other thing I wanted to say was, I can't remember who said it. It might have been, was it Kirby in the group about the optimal hydration day when it comes to listening to our body. She mentioned looking at the color of our urine. And this is such a good one. I can't believe I forgot to mention this when I was talking about listening to your body, because yes, we can literally listen to the cues and feel the sensations. It's like, oh, I'm thirsty, I need water. But can we also look at the external kind of like measures of health, like the color of our urine and even our stool health? Because both of those are going to give us an idea of our hydration status, right? So if our urine is more clear, then we are more hydrated. So that would be a really great way for you, Narelle. I know we were talking about your water intake to kind of judge if you're at that like sweet spot or if you do need a little bit more or anything like that. And same with our stool health. So often if we are constipated, we are dehydrated. So that's one of the first things I recommend. If you're ever constipated, make sure you're drinking enough water. So if currently you're not passing a daily bowel motion, but daily stool, you actually want to make sure your water is under control. Yes, there's many other variables here as well, including things like fiber, including things like stress, all of that. But water can be one kind of thing that contributes to that. So that can be another way to kind of measure if we are optimally hydrated and getting enough for our body. So I think that's everything I wanted to cover before diving into the Blissful Relaxation Day. So let's talk about our nervous system. And I believe that focusing on our nervous system is one of the most important things that we can do for our health and also just like our life in general and our happiness and just how we feel showing up in the world. And the reason for this is because quite literally, when we are stressed, so many of our systems and functions actually take a bit of a back burner and they're not functioning at their optimal. So if I'm stressed, my body does not care about digesting my food because the way that the chemical reactions are occurring in my body, the way that my nervous system is activated into the sympathetic nervous system, which is fight or flight, it feels like there's some sort of immediate danger. So even though it might just be that I feel like I've got too many things to do before a work deadline, or I'm sitting in traffic and it's stressing me out because I'm going to be late for somewhere I need to be, or I'm just getting some notifications pinging and it's feeling overwhelming and stressful, whatever it is, it doesn't know the difference between those things and something that's actually a risk for us, like a danger for us. So like back in the day when we were living in the wilderness and we were being chased by a wild animal, our body doesn't differentiate. It's all the same stress signals within our body. And what happens then is if it thinks we're in some sort of immediate danger, it doesn't care about the present moment. Oh, sorry, it doesn't care about future things. It only cares about the present moment. So it's putting a lot of energy, a lot of attention into things that are going to help us survive in that present moment. So if it thinks we need to run away from some sort of wild animal, it's going to be like, all right, let's put a lot of strength into your legs. Let's really make your senses sharp. Let's get your heart rate up. Let's get the oxygen flowing. Like, let's get you ready to either run or fight, right? So it doesn't care about digesting that food that we just ate. It doesn't care about fighting off the pathogens that we're naturally exposed to in the air. It doesn't care about supporting the immune system as much. Like these things kind of decrease in their capacity to function at their optimal. So that's just two examples of things that work less when we're stressed. So our digestion, our immune system, it impacts our hormones massively. It impacts our blood sugar levels. It impacts our heart health, all the things. So what we really want to do is start showing our body that we are safe. And it sounds silly that it's like we are getting that same amount of stress that if we were running from a wild animal in a way. However, the way that society is these days is it's a very fast-paced society. There's a lot on our plates. There's a lot of expectations from the external world, but also internally, right? Like how many of us put a lot of pressure on ourselves? I'm sure I'm not the only one. And that can create extra stress. So when we consider all of this, it's like, okay, we actually are under lots of stress. And I often find people like, oh no, I'm not stressed. Like, I feel all good. And then they actually relax and they're like, oh, I didn't realize how stressed I was. It's because we've just become so used to and accustomed to living in this stress state. And yes, there's the times where we notice it. Yes, anxiety numbers are through the roof because more and more people are having dysregulated nervous systems because we're not necessarily prioritizing nervous system regulation and because we're just being thrown with all sorts of things that stress us out. So really just like, first of all, having compassion for ourselves always and not being like, oh, I shouldn't feel this way. Again, that should word, see? It's like, if we start to think, oh, I shouldn't feel a particular way, we're placing an expectation and we're wanting to change our internal state. And that can create more stress because it's like, oh, well, if I'm not meant to be this way, then I should be another way. And again, using should on purpose because these are the things we tell ourselves. And then we're feeling more stressed because it's like, oh, but I'm feeling anxious, but I shouldn't be feeling anxious. And we're in this loop of like, then we feel more anxious. And then we turn to things like emotional eating or like scrolling social media or binge watching television shows because we feel uncomfortable with that emotion of that anxiety in our body. But what if we could actually just learn to be present with it and start to check in and be like, okay, I'm feeling really anxious. What actually needs to shift here? Maybe I am taking on too much. Maybe I need to start to say no to a couple of things. Maybe there is a conversation I need to have with someone because there's some conflict here and we're not talking about it. And it's really like it's building resentment and it's stressing me out. And I want to be able to clear this so I'm not carrying that, whatever it is. But just starting to see the ways that stress is present in your life. And starting to work just like with food, and I encourage food from that preventative health measure. Like I don't recommend waiting until we get sick to focus on our food. It's actually the opposite. And not just that, not just to prevent us getting ill, but also to help us thrive and feel better. Can we take that approach with our nervous system and start to prevent ourselves getting into states of burnout or states of lots of stress? And we can simply do this by doing something every day to support our nervous system. And this doesn't have to be a huge thing. It can be a small thing. It can be taking a few deep breaths, which is one of the best ways to regulate our nervous system. And what happens when we start to take this time and start to focus on nervous system regulation is we can move out of that fight and flight response. We can tell our body that we are safe, and we can move into what's called rest and digest. And this is our parasympathetic nervous system. And this is where all of those other functions can come back online. It's even got it in the name, rest and digest. It's because we're starting to digest properly again. We're starting to rest and restore rather than before when we're on high alert and our body is like, all systems go, we've got to keep you safe. And what happens if we stay in this chronically stressed state, we might not necessarily be in fight and flight the whole time, but we can switch into things like freeze response, functional freeze response. We can switch into like dorsal vagal shutdown, where we are very much more internal and don't want to socialize, and we're more in like those low phases and we're just like, I'm just so stressed and so overwhelmed. And I want to tell you that procrastination is a survival response. And it's actually a sign that we could be in freeze, because it can be a functional form of freeze, like we're still functioning, we're still doing little things, but sometimes not even. Sometimes we're stuck in bed, we can't get out of bed, we're procrastinating even getting out of bed. That can be a sign that our nervous system is overburdened and has been in a chronic state of stress. Same as when we're in that doom scroll, right? That can be a sign of freeze, because you can't make yourself stop. You're just there scrolling, scrolling, scrolling. And when we start to look at it from this lens, having compassion for ourselves, not making excuses or being like, oh, that's okay, this is like just because I'm in freeze and I'm just going to keep going with this, but being kind to ourselves, having compassion, being like, oh, okay, I'm here again. I'm in that doom scroll, or I'm back at that pantry emotionally eating. Whatever it is for us, we all have different vices. Sometimes we have many vices, and when we remove one, it can go to others, which is the importance of dealing with it at the root cause. But when you do find yourself going to these, or when you do find yourself really struggling to get out of bed, or sitting in the car because you just don't even want to get in the house, like who's done that, where you just kind of sit in the car for a bit when you get home from somewhere or when you're about to go out somewhere, that can actually be a sign of that freeze response and that functional freeze. So being kind to yourself, not putting those shoulds on yourself, right? Not shoulding on yourself, and just being like, okay, I see what Shana was talking about. Like I am in a bit of that survival state. What do I need to support my nervous system right now? So really always coming to everything in life with compassion. I promise you, like I said, the first day, if you just start being kinder to yourself, that in itself will massively change your life. And remember the difference between kind and nice. Sometimes the kind thing is the harder thing to do. Like the kind thing when we're stuck in a doom scroll would be to say, okay, I see what I'm doing here. I acknowledge that I'm really stressed and I'm here in this doom scroll, and I'm going to choose to put this down. That's the kind thing. The nice thing would be like, yeah, cool, do this for 5 more hours, right? It's like that people pleaser kind of thing. And people pleasing is another survival response. So if you are a people pleaser, that can also be a sign that we are in survival, because there's 4 different survival states. There's fight, which is where we want to like fight it off. And this can actually show up in our life as keeping ourselves incredibly busy and taking things head on all the time and being like, I'm just going to stay so busy that I don't have to deal with those emotions that I don't want to feel and deal with this stress that's coming up. So that can be one of the ways the fight response also shows up. Same with flight. That could be where we're like avoiding things a lot. So that can be like forms of procrastination can come under the flight, where we're kind of like avoiding the things that we need to do. But generally procrastination is more of that freeze response. So freeze, I've mentioned, is often like that procrastination. And obviously freeze itself is like literally just sitting there doing nothing as well, but there's functional freeze and then there's just freeze, which is like you're playing dead essentially. That's kind of like where it originated. It's like if you're playing dead, that's the freeze response. And then fawn. Fawn, it's also called appease, aka people pleasing. So this is what happens when we're feeling stressed and we're just trying to cater to other people's needs to try and make the situation better. So rather than having a difficult conversation or putting a boundary in place, we're just like, okay, yeah, I'm just going to go into this appease. And again, not beating yourself up if you are a people pleaser. I'm a recovering people pleaser. So many of us have been there. And when we can see that for what it is and be like, oh, I understand why I am this way now. I understand that different circumstances throughout my life or behavior I had modeled to me or different things that happened led me to feel safer when I just appeased the other person rather than standing up for myself. And this is part of this journey of like all of the things that I teach ultimately, and of like stepping into our most radiant self, our most confident self, our most nourished self. It's like boundaries is part of that. Communication is part of that. And that all comes along the way. So essentially, what I want to say here is be kind to yourself if you do find yourself like that, whether you are someone who goes more towards like that functional freeze and procrastination, or whether you are the opposite and you're just busy, 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 don't let yourself ever rest or can't actually rest. And in the past, I go between both, and like I still catch myself there sometimes, and it's a work in progress. But having the tools and having the awareness in itself has been a big game changer. And now I can see when I'm in one of those, or if I'm going up and down between them, I'm like, oh, okay, I see what's happening here. What needs to be addressed internally? How can I support my nervous system? Or this also links into the emotional health day. And we'll be speaking more about it there as well. But just starting to really like notice what's there and what's present for you, and notice where you may have been really hard on yourself for these things, and how can you be kinder to yourself in future. Like we were saying on day one, how would we speak to that 7-year-old child if they were feeling like that, or they were doing these kind of behaviors? Hopefully it would be with kindness and love. So doing that for ourselves. Same with our best friend. If our best friend is stuck in a doom scroll, we're not going to be like, oh, come on, you lazy bee, like get up, do something. You might, if that's coming from that place of love and you have that kind of like banter, but it wouldn't be like a really negative kind of like what we'd essentially be doing to ourselves, is what I'm getting at. So first, always coming with kindness, and that in itself will also help to support our nervous system, because the kinder we can be to ourselves, the more safe we're going to feel within ourselves. And this is one of the things when it comes to nervous system regulation. It's important to help ourselves feel safe. And it can be really difficult to help ourselves feel safe when we are being incredibly mean to ourselves all the time, right? It's like we don't even feel safe in our own body, in our own mind, if we're just constantly berating ourselves. How can we feel safe in the world? And of course, we're going to feel stressed. Of course, we're going to be in the survival responses. And if you are currently in that state where you're being incredibly mean to yourself in your head, and that inner critic has just run rampant and it's used to that, be kind and know that it will take time to reprogram that and to retrain that. And the more you can just be like, okay, I hear you, but we're not buying into that today, and just see it as chatter. Pretend you've got someone like that devil on your shoulder just yapping away, and stop actually internalizing it and making it mean anything. Just because the thought crosses your mind doesn't mean it's true, doesn't mean we have to buy into it. So starting to be that observer, and this is where meditation can be a really powerful practice, because you start to learn to watch your thoughts instead of get attached to your thoughts, right? So the more we can like watch our thoughts and notice that it's like, okay, we are the observer, and our mind is just always going to be going all sorts of random directions, and there's going to be the inner critic, there's going to be the higher self, like more empowered version of ourselves. Awesome. And just choosing what we want to listen to, and choosing what we are just like, not today, inner critic, not today. But always coming from that place of kindness first, so that you can start to feel safer. The more you develop this self-compassion, the safer you will feel within yourself. Therefore, the more it will support your nervous system. Therefore, the more your entire life will absolutely change. Safety is a huge key piece. So, like I mentioned earlier, when it comes to nervous system regulation, putting something in our day that's going to be supportive of our nervous system. So this will change day to day as well. This can be an area for you to kind of practice trusting yourself, knowing what you need, and doing things that support you. So it can be something like a meditation. It can be linked to our movement. Movement is a great way to support nervous system. As I mentioned, we need to discern whether we need to work in or work out. And some days the supportive thing for our nervous system is going to be to work in and do something a little bit more gentle. Someone in the group mentioned they're doing like Qigong. Amazing. That's a great form. Yoga. We've got stretching, we've got the somatic workouts I spoke about, which I'll share a little bit more about somatic workouts at some point in today's talk. But you've got many different options of like movements that will support the nervous system. And then other days it's going to be like, actually that workout is really going to support my nervous system. So sometimes I know that a run is exactly what I need, because I'm just feeling so like there's just a lot of energy present. And I'm like, okay, a run is the perfect thing for me today, because it's going to help me move this energy. It's going to help me get really in my body. It's going to get those endorphins flowing. And then I can come home and do something that does relax me, right? So discerning whether you need a workout or a work in. But then there's so many other things non-exercise related. And all of these kind of like ingredients for a nourished life and pillars, they're all going to feed in and support nervous system regulation as well. So the way we eat is going to support the way that our nervous system is functioning and acting. So the more we can eat that beautiful real food majority of the time, the more supportive that's going to be for our nervous system as well, because we're not adding stress to our body by adding lots of processed things or artificial things and all that kind of stuff. So there's even the food plays a part, water as well. We don't want to stress our body out physically by being dehydrated all the time. So all of these kind of feed into each other. So having those healthy habits and aiming to build those up wherever you currently are, or some of you are already nailing some of those, which is amazing. So they kind of feed into nervous system regulation too. And then there's things like some days it might be having a bath. Some days it might be treating yourself to a massage or a facial or something if you really love and enjoy that. Other days it might be just sitting and having a cup of tea and just really mindfully enjoying that. It could be reading a book that you love and that helps you de-stress and unwind. It can be anything kind of like that. Like there's an endless list, and I encourage you to kind of like put together a list of things that do help you relax and do help you unwind. And I invite you to question whether TV actually is one of those, because I always hear, and I've been guilty of this in the past as well, and there's nothing wrong with it. If this is true for you, that's okay. But I hear a lot of people say, I need the TV to help me unwind. And what I'm actually hearing there is we need the TV to distract ourselves from the emotions that we're feeling inside, because we haven't yet learnt to regulate our nervous system or feel our feelings. And I'm going to talk all about the emotional health stuff and feeling our feelings in the Emotional Health Day. But as a society, we are more prone to distract ourselves from things rather than actually sit with them. So it makes sense that we feel like we need the TV to help us unwind, because it's distracting ourselves from them. So it's helping us feel like, oh yeah, and then we kind of like move on and get distracted and life goes on, but we haven't actually dealt with what's underneath it. So while yes, TV can absolutely be something that supports relaxation, if you're watching calming things, because I'm sorry, but violent action kind of movies, they're not supporting the nervous system. Same with like serial killer podcasts and things, can be super interesting, but are they actually supporting our nervous system? So sometimes supporting our nervous system might be temporarily reducing the amount of time we spend watching TV or listening to those kinds of podcasts that get our heart rate up and have us like on the edge of our seat, right? So just like starting to consider it and knowing that if TV is one of those things that you currently are using to distract yourself, it's okay. Be kind to yourself first, always. Don't be like, oh, now I'm doing this. I shouldn't be doing this. Don't add more shoulds there, right? We've got enough shoulds going on already. So really just like noticing though, and noticing when are you using something like television to distract yourself, or when you're actually feeling really regulated and it is actually something that's just relaxing and helping you unwind, because you're in that place where you're already like, no, I'm actually feeling like I'm really relaxed and I'm really excited to watch this show because I'm really loving that. So by no means am I saying you have to give up TV or give up social media or give up podcasts. Absolutely not. It's all welcome. But just discerning what's best for you and discerning where you're doing it from as well. Same with social media. It's like we could be on social media as a distraction technique, or we could be on social media because we're actually wanting to go on there and connect and catch up and see what our friends are up to. And there's different intentionality behind it. So nothing is good or bad until we make it that way. And we place all these stories and labels on things. Same with food, like I mentioned. And I think I said in a comment to someone when I was replying to some of them yesterday that there is no bad food, only bad habits. And it sounds funny because there's certain foods that I'm like, oh, don't like that food, don't recommend that food, like things like vegetable oil. If you listen to me talking about vegetable oil, I don't recommend us incorporating and consuming vegetable oils. And so then for me to say there's no such thing as bad food, there's only bad habits. Let me explain, because yes, vegetable oil in itself, if we have it every now and then, our body's going to be fine. Yeah, we might have a higher omega-6 ratio. Yeah, it might be really processed and not going through the best production process. However, in itself, we can't classify it as like bad. It's when we're having it a lot that it becomes bad. Same with something like, let's say, pizzas. Pizzas themselves, they're not bad, quote unquote. I always like to use the quote because I hate calling foods good or bad. It's when we're eating pizza every day that it becomes a negative thing for our health, right? Which can be viewed as something that is a bad impact. So just starting to see that it's like not necessarily a thing that is good or bad. It's either what we're doing with it, the way we're approaching it, all of that kind of stuff. So that's kind of like a little bit of a tangent, but ultimately today is stress less kind of day, relaxation day. And in order to do that, I want you to choose what's right for you. Maybe it's kind of like, cool, I'm going to take some pressure off. And you know what, Shanna, I'm not going to do any action step today because an action step feels like it's just stressing me out more. And maybe it's like, oh, I love that idea when she mentioned a bath. I'm so excited for a bath and I'm going to add some Epsom salts so I get some magnesium to really support my nervous system. You feel into it. Maybe it is that cup of tea. Maybe it's playing with a puppy. Maybe it is baking some cookies because that actually you really love to do that and you enjoy that. And that's something that relaxes you because you love being in the kitchen. Feel into what feels good for you and what's going to support you in relaxation. Maybe it's something as simple as taking like a few deep breaths or doing a 5-minute meditation. It can be guided or it can just be sitting in stillness. Maybe it's grounding and placing your bare feet in the grass and just being outside. Maybe it's taking some photos and going outside and taking a few beautiful photos. Whatever it is, maybe it's hugging someone. Let's bring hugging on the table as something. That's so relaxing and that can actually help with co-regulation, especially if that other person is regulated. So maybe it's you just give someone a really big hug. Whatever it is today, just find something that's really going to support with that nervous system relaxation. It could even be choosing to work in instead of work out. It could be cooking yourself a really nourishing meal because you're like, awesome, this is really going to support my body and my nervous system and help to bring down that inflammation and decrease the stress on my body. So that's your action step for today. And I haven't been mentioning it the past few days, but every day we go through one of these ingredients for a nourished life. Look at your wheel of health that you've got and just assess where you currently are. And remember, this is from that place of no judgment, just saying, okay, based on that conversation we had, where am I sitting currently? And this is just collecting data so that at the end of this, we can see which areas to focus on first. Right? So not being like, oh, I'm really low on all these and I'm doomed. It's not the case. Remember, you've got more opportunity for growth. That's actually a really exciting thing. It's like when we're at rock bottom, it's only up from there, right? Not saying if you're not doing these things, you're at rock bottom, just using that as an analogy and a way to compare it. So marking this off on your wheel of health and assessing kind of where you are, and feel free to make any other notes as well. So just starting to like look at those areas and how you want to show up differently in 2024 or what's going well. Juliana mentioned tapping. I freaking love tapping. If you've never heard of EFT tapping, highly, highly recommend. I think there's a stat that like after tapping, it's like a 42% stress reduction or something in that moment. So EFT, you can Google it. I've actually got a video that you can follow along with someone called Mel Kovachev, the founder of the Seed Cycle, where she takes us through one to decrease stress and overwhelm. So I'll link that in the Facebook group as well, because that one's perfect for today. Yeah, tapping is amazing. Thank you, Juliana, for mentioning that. Love baking and cooking, hugging and taking food photos. Yeah, amazing. Think you've hit the nail on the head for me and my emotions. I'm in 3 of these categories a lot. Yeah, totally get that. And this is like, it's such a big thing and such a beautiful thing the more we work on this, because the amount of transformation you'll see, Narelle, is just next level. And I get it. I've been there. Like I mentioned, there's still times I find myself there. We're all human. We're never going to be like fully quote unquote healed. I don't believe we need healing or fixing. We're already perfect. It's that deconditioning, right? So that choice of word, even I like use with discretion, like discernment, discretion, but yeah, and this is what I love to support people and guide people through. Beautiful. Can you show more? Yes, somatic practices. Thank you for reminding me, Sahej. So somatic practices is actually something I utilize within my programs, and Mind Body Food Freedom, one of my programs, has like a somatic healing toolkit kind of thing. So there's heaps of different exercises, but it's essentially like things that support us getting in our body. And technically any form of movement is a somatic movement when we're being really present with the inner experience. And yes, there's certain somatic movements that are going to support with the movement of emotions and the release of emotions. So lots of those hip ones, like if you've ever done yoga and you've been in pigeon pose, that one can actually be one that brings up a lot of sadness and grief for people. And you'll hear quite commonly that people might have like a cry and a release when they're in pigeon pose, or any of those ones that kind of move the hips, like butterfly and all of that. So some of it involves rhythmic moving, some of it involves shaking, like I mentioned yesterday, the somatic shakes. Some of it can just be like embodied, like flow kind of thing. There's many different forms. It can be legs up the wall kind of thing. So yoga does have some elements of that, definitely. And yeah, there's many somatic movements that fall under the yoga category, or sometimes it's yoga poses, but you're just kind of moving more. But yeah, this is something that I do incorporate in my programs now because I've seen how amazing it has been for me. And I recorded like a little flow for a one-on-one client that I'll share with all of you. It's just a 15-minute full body relaxation one that you can do. And that's got some beautiful like movements in there that will help to relax your body. So that might be your thing for the day. So beautiful. That's all the comments. How are we feeling about that? I'm over time. I can talk. I can really talk. Sorry, guys. Need to be better with my boundaries and keeping to my 30 minutes. But yeah, thank you so much for being here. And obviously there was a lot we went through, and there's so much more I could say about this. Like I said, this is the kind of stuff that I work with my one-on-one clients with, that I do in my programs, like the upcoming one, Mind, Body, Food, Freedom, and Radiance. Like, I love this stuff because I've seen how much it changes my life and how much it can change other people's lives. So I'll share more about all of those after this 10-day container if you are interested in going deeper into all of this. But for now, just starting with what can you do today to support your nervous system and really help yourself relax. Beautiful. I'm so glad you guys loved it. I love it too. I could talk about this stuff for hours and hours and hours. Beautiful. So have a beautiful, relaxing, blissfully relaxing day. And I want to share with you actually something my friend shared with me the other day, that the word bliss is any emotion fully felt. So I'll talk more about our emotions and not being afraid of our emotions and learning to really feel our emotions in the Emotional Health Day. But blissful relaxation, sometimes that is sitting in those uncomfortable emotions as well and allowing them to be. Beautiful. Me three. Yes, I'm loving all the love for today's topic. Enjoy taking that into your life, because remember, knowledge is just knowledge until we put it into action and start to experience the benefits. So yeah, do something for you. Fill up your cup today. It's not selfish to focus on you and fill up your cup first. It is actually the most selfless thing you can do, because you show up better in life, in the world, for other people when you're coming from that overflow. And unfortunately, we've kind of been conditioned to think we need to always show up for everyone else first and that we come last. And I really want to flip that on its head and show you that you can actually show up for you first, and it will just ripple into all of the other areas of your life. So enjoy relaxing your nervous system, and sending you all so much love. I will see you tomorrow for our day about sleep. Bye for now.